Hi, I'm Elliot, and today I'll be talking about a group of people who are regularly misunderstood by society, misrepresented by the media, and micromanaged by public policy. No, not theater majors, though fair. I'm talking about the deaf community. Specifically, I'll be looking at deaf culture as a subculture because while the dominant view often sees deafness as a disability, many deaf people themselves see it as something very different: a culture, a community, and a complete worldview that doesn't rely on ears. But let's rewind a bit. Before formal deaf education existed, society wasn't really sure what to do with deaf people, so they mostly didn't. Deaf individuals were often shuttered away, treated as burdens, or dismissed as incapable of language, reason, or meaningful participation. That started to change in the early 1800s. In 1817, the American School for the Deaf opened in Connecticut. It was the first of its kind in the US, and it laid the groundwork for what would eventually become a full-fledged culture. American Sign Language developed from there, evolving from French Sign Language and signs that people already use in the United States coming together. As deaf people came together in schools, they began forming shared norms, values, and identity. Fast forward a bit, and you get entire generations growing up with a shared language and a growing sense that no, they do not need to be fixed. As nurse practitioner Kathleen Richardson puts it, the deaf community comprises a cultural and linguistic minority rather than a disability group. Members share a common language, ASL, and identify with a culture that includes values, norms, traditions, and behaviors unique to deaf people. End quote. Translation: this isn't just a bunch of people with the same diagnosis, it's a culture. Deaf culture in the United States revolves around American Sign Language, or ASL, which, plot twist, is not English in hand form. It's a full language with grammar, syntax, and rules. So that intro to ASL class that you took for gen ed credit probably didn't make you fluent. Sorry. Marion Schulteis, who wrote a comparative study on deaf communities in the United States and Germany, explains that, quote, the use of sign language is the most important marker of cultural belonging within the deaf community. It is not only a tool for communication, but a symbol of identity and resistance, end quote. In other words, language isn't just how people talk, it's how they push back. Other cultural norms? I can think of a few. Visual attention is key. If you want to get someone's attention, flash the lights, tap a shoulder, or make very specific eye contact. In hearing cultures, that's considered rude, but in the deaf community, it's just how you get someone's attention. Now for the part where hearing people really drop the ball: education. Once deaf schools were established, things were expected to improve, and in many ways they did. But then came oralism. Starting in the late 1800s, oralist educators insisted that deaf children speak and lip read, no signing allowed. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a strict policy, and the methods ranged from misguided to flat out abusive. Students were punished for signing, slapped, isolated, made to wear mittens. Some had their hands tied behind their backs, others were forced into speech drills, mouthing words they couldn't hear in front of mirrors until their jaws ached. Signing was seen as a failure. Even the so-called non-abusive methods, like mainstreaming deaf students without interpreters or pushing lip reading as a cure-all, still erased students' language and community. The cultural damage was deep, and deaf people pushed back. The historical tension is still alive today, usually in the form of debates over cochlear implants. Some see them as helpful tools, while others see them as a modern reboot of cure them mentality and eugenics. When deaf characters show up in media, and that's a pretty big when, they tend to fall into one of two predictable categories. Researchers Carol Padden and Tom Humphries have written about this, pointing out that deaf people in media are often portrayed as either silent and mysterious or helpless and dependent, with very little in between. The problem with these portrayals isn't just that they're lazy, it's that they erase real deaf culture. They focus on what deaf people can't do instead of showing their language, humor, creativity, community, the things that actually define their lives. Notable exceptions include Coda, Switch to Birth, Sound of Metal, and This Close. Watch them if you can. My favorite is Coda. I cried. These stereotypes shape how society treats deaf individuals. When all audiences see are sanitized, pity-based images or hyper-assimilated, speech-focused success stories, it becomes harder to understand why ASL access, deaf spaces, and resisting cochlear implant pressure actually matters. So what do we make of all this? Deaf culture is not about what's missing, it's about what's present. A full language, a connected community, a shared history, and constant pushback against systems that keep trying to redefine it. Deaf people aren't broken hearing people. They're members of a subculture, a powerful one that has made it very clear they don't need your pity. They just need you to listen or, watch closely. Thank you.